All right, today we're headed to this incredible, rugged cliffside in Cornwall. It's a place where history and myth just completely smash into each other. We're talking about Tintagel Castle, the place that's famous for being the birthplace of King Arthur. But what's the real story behind these stones? Let's dig in and find out.
So, here it is, Tintagel, and wow, is it something else? It's got to be one of the most spectacular, most evocative sights in all of Britain. You can practically feel the centuries of stories swirling around in that sea mist, can't you? For hundreds and hundreds of years, this place has meant one thing, one name above all others, Arthur.
And this is pretty much where it all kicks off, on paper anyway. Back around the year 1138, a writer, Geoffrey of Monmouth, puts these exact words into his famous History of the Kings of Britain. And just like that, boom, he forever links Tintagel with the conception of this legendary king.
But here's the big question, right? The one that just hangs over all these ruins. Is the story true? Did King Arthur really begin here? Or is the truth something, well, even more surprising? All right, let's peel back the layers and separate the legend from the real deal archaeology.
Okay, first up, let's dive into the story itself, the one that put this place on the map. And it is a classic, full of magic, desire, and a whole lot of deception. So the story goes a little something like this. You've got King Uther Pendragon, and he is absolutely obsessed with Igraine, who just so happens to be the wife of his rival, Gorlois. So Gorlois, trying to keep her safe, hides her away in what he thinks is his most secure fortress, Tintagel. But he didn't count on magic, did he? The wizard Merlin steps in, casts a spell, and disguises Uther to look exactly like Gorlois. Uther walks right into the castle, tricks Igraine, and from that one night, the legend of Arthur is born.
I mean, it's a fantastic story, right? But here's the first major twist in our tale. That castle, the one we all picture when we hear this legend, well, it wasn't even there during Arthur's time. Not even close.
Yeah, so when you walk among these incredible weathered stone walls today, you're not actually seeing the fortress of Duke Gorlois from the 5th or 6th century. Nope, what you're looking at is from a completely different era, much, much later. The guy who actually built this castle was Richard, the Earl of Cornwall. And get this, he built it in 1233. That's more than 700 years after King Arthur was supposed to have been running around.
So you gotta ask, why? Why build it then? Well, Richard was a pretty savvy guy, a shrewd political operator. He knew that Geoffrey of Monmouth's story was a massive hit, super popular. So he builds this castle to basically hitch his wagon to the legend, to connect himself to these heroic Cornish kings. He even had it built in an old-fashioned style on purpose, just to make it look more ancient, like it came straight out of a myth. You could almost call it a 13th century PR stunt.
So when you lay it out on a timeline, it becomes crystal clear. First, you get the story, written around 1138. Then, almost 100 years later, the castle gets built because of the story. So the ruins we see today, they're not the source of the legend, they're a tribute to the legend.
Okay, so if Richard's medieval castle wasn't there back in Arthur's day, was anything here? And this, my friends, is where the real story of Tintagel gets absolutely fascinating.
So what was actually here during what we call the Dark Ages? For the longest time, honestly, nobody was really sure. But thanks to modern archaeology, a whole lost world has started to re-emerge from right under our feet.
Starting way back in the 1930s, and especially over the last few years, archaeologists have been digging away at Tintagel, and what they've been finding, it has completely changed the game. It's rewritten everything we thought we knew about this place.
It turns out that during the exact time Arthur was supposed to be alive, we're talking the 5th and 6th centuries, Tintagel wasn't some remote, forgotten outpost. No way. It was a bustling, high-status stronghold, probably for the royalty of the Kingdom of Dumnonia. They've uncovered hundreds of buildings, luxury goods like fancy wine jugs all the way from the Mediterranean, and even proof that the people living here were literate, that they could read and write Latin.
And listen to this quote from the archaeologist Charles Thomas, because it really drives the point home. The amount of imported pottery found here was, and I quote, dramatically greater than that from any other single site in either Britain or Ireland. I mean, think about that. We're talking more fancy imported pottery here than at all other known sites from the period in Britain and Ireland combined. This place wasn't some sleepy backwater. It was a major international trading hub.
So what we have are basically two Tintagels, right? There's the legendary birthplace of a mythical king, and then there's the very real, historical center of a powerful, wealthy kingdom. So the question is, how do these two stories come together today?
Well, for one thing, the archaeology just blew the old theories right out of the water. For decades, the best guess was that this might have been some kind of remote Celtic monastery. But now we know the reality was so much more exciting. This place was a hub of power, of wealth, of international connections, all during Britain's so-called Dark Ages.
And if you go to the site today, you'll see that it totally embraces both of these stories. You've got these amazing modern sculptures inspired by the legend, like this incredible statue, Gallows, standing right there among the actual historical foundations of this ancient Dark Age settlement. It's like the myth and the reality are literally standing shoulder to shoulder.
And, you know, this blending of fact and fiction isn't really new. People have been flocking here since the Victorian era, all of them drawn in by the romance and the power of that King Arthur story. At this point, the legend is just as much a part of Tintagel's identity as any of the physical ruins.
But there's a problem. This incredible site, with its two amazing identities, the historical one and the legendary one, is now facing a very, very real and very modern threat.
See, the same cliffs that made Tintagel such a perfect fortress are now its greatest enemy. They're crumbling into the sea. In fact, English Heritage recently named it one of the 6 historic sites in England most at risk from coastal erosion. This piece of our past is literally disappearing before our eyes. This amazing new footbridge they opened in 2019, it spans the massive gap where the land is already collapsed. And yeah, it's a stunning piece of engineering for sure, but it's also this constant, stark reminder of just how fragile the site is. It's a modern link to a past that is quite literally on the edge of disappearing forever.
And all this leaves us with one final big question to think about. At Tintagel, the true story, the memory of a real, powerful, wealthy kingdom, was lost for centuries. But the fictional story, the one about a magical conception, that story survived. It thrived. It even inspired someone to build a whole castle. So it really makes you wonder, what's more powerful in the long run? The history we unearth or the legends we create?